And it's all to do, as I said, with selling to emotional desires, because when we sell to these emotional desires, we are literally increasing the perceived pleasure of owning your product or service. Now, I've got a couple of things to set this up before we jump into it. And the first thing I needed to talk about is this. Nobody's buying more of what they have today. Okay, I'm not going to be buying a product or service if I'm comfortable or happy with what I currently have. Everybody who's looking to buy your company's product or service is looking to buy a better tomorrow. Okay, so the better tomorrow is where their emotional desires can be fulfilled. So that's why it's so important to start engaging with emotional desires and really understanding your clients and prospects' emotional desires. Because when you talk about fulfilling them, your ability to sell to them will absolutely go through the roof, because you're talking about building and creating a better tomorrow for them. And this really is a B2B and a B2C play. So a new definition of selling, which I just wanted to quickly share with you as well, is selling. In my book, I came up with this a while ago. In my way of thinking, selling is about helping your prospects, helping your customers believe, which is a massively important subject as well, believe they can have what they most want. And what they most want in life is to have those emotional desires fulfilled. And if you fulfill their emotional desires, then you're going a long way towards closing sales. So when you target people's emotional desires, when you're with your messaging, when you're communicating with them, when you've elicited them, and then you talk about them during a sales cycle or a sales process, or even a meeting, then you massively increase their perceived pleasure of owning your product or service. And that creates a more committed, more motivated buyer. And in fact, although I've taken it out of deck, in my mind, I think what happens in that moment is you stop selling and you start helping them to see how they can achieve this emotional desire, and they start selling themselves on you. And it's a really interesting twist in dynamic, because actually, if you're not very good at closing and you don't particularly like closing, then the irony is that those prospects and clients start to close themselves on you, and they get to the point where they're asking all those questions, which are like, so how do I get this? Where do I sign up? So they really do start to close themselves on you. Now, I've been using and sharing these ideas with my clients for over the last 10 years or so, and I can tell you they are absolute dynamite. In fact, I'm going to quickly, we've got enough time, I'm going to quickly tell you a very quick story about how I first used this. So I'm sitting in a meeting in a massive media agency, a big global media agency, and I'm pitching my services as a trainer. And I elicit the person's emotional desires that I'm selling to. And what was interesting when I did this was two things. The first thing that was really interesting was they didn't come up with an answer straight away. And it took about 20 seconds for them to think about what their answer was. And in that 20 seconds, I was absolutely terrified and kind of going, oh no, this is a nightmare. And in fact, what I ended up doing, because I don't want to fill in the gap for them because it's about their emotional desires, right? What I ended up doing was writing sort of scribbly lines on a piece of paper, pretending to take notes. So that's the first thing. The second thing that happened, which was really interesting, is back then there was a ceiling on what agencies were willing to pay trainers for a day's training. And I can tell you, we more than doubled that ceiling in this program because we sold to emotional desires. So it's a really important and powerful tool to master. All right, that said, let's talk about the hierarchy of influence. Now, the hierarchy of influence was a tool I developed. Now, what you will see with this model is there is a massive, great big arrow that goes up. And we're going to start at the top and work our way down, but the influence starts at the bottom and works its way up. All right, so we're going to start at the top. Now, we all produce results. Some of those results are amazing, brilliant, and fantastic. And some of those results are results we'd probably like to change. And if we want to change our results, then we need to do something differently. And it was Einstein that said, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again. So our behaviors have a direct impact on the results we're able to produce. So if we want to change your results, change your behaviors. So your behaviors directly influence your results. What influences your behaviors? Well, amongst other things, it's your skills and knowledge. What you know determines the kind of behaviors you can do. Now, what was interesting is I didn't start off life as a trainer. I was actually a director, as in lights, camera, action. And when I was leaving directing and transitioning into training, I could have gone off and trained as, say, an architect or an accountant or a lawyer or a whatever I was going to do, right? I ended up training as a trainer, but I could have gone in any direction. And I would have gone off and got some skills and knowledge and use those skills and knowledge to develop a new set of behaviors and produce a different set of results. So your skills and knowledge have a very direct impact on the kind of behaviors you're able to do. Look at this very quickly from a training perspective. I use my skills and knowledge as a trainer to go in and to help delegates within an organization change their behaviors to produce a better result. So hopefully you can understand this model very easily. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about it in terms of business, because if you are relying on features and benefits as a way to sell your product or service, I can tell you now, it's the weakest way to sell. Okay. And this model demonstrates why that's the case. And there's another massive challenge. If it's the weakest way to sell, then I can guarantee you're selling a commodity and it becomes very price sensitive. So let's put this in a business context. And let me say this. I'm going to say as a massive generalization, your skills and knowledge are your features. So your features in a business are all the kind of clients you've had, the IP you might have, the people that work in the business, the brilliant things that you're able to create for those companies that you currently work with, etc. And you're going to use your features to change the behaviors of, say, somebody out in the general public. So let me give you a quick example of that. Let's say you're an ad agency, you're a media agency. If you are using your skills and knowledge, you're looking to change the behaviors of the general public to, guess what? Produce a positive result for your clients, which is a benefit to them, i.e. you're going to try and sell more of their product. If as a trainer, I go in and I work with an organization, I'm going to give the delegates a new set of skills and knowledge to change their behaviors to produce a positive result for the business I'm working with. It's the same everywhere. It really doesn't matter what you're selling. You're going to go in, you're going to ultimately use your features to change the behaviors of someone. It might be internal in the business or external, general public or a niche in the public, to produce a positive result for that business. This is classic sales. This is features and benefits. Everybody's been using it since time immemorial, right? Now, if you remember what I said a moment ago, if you rely on features and benefits to sell, it really is the weakest way to sell. And here's the reason why. If you accept this model for what it is, then let me ask you a question. Do you have competition? Does your business, does the business you're in have competitors? And I'm going to say the chances are more than likely, okay? Do your competitors have the kind of skills and knowledge that you have? Again, I'm going to make an assumption, and I'm going to say more than likely. So if they have the same kind of features, i.e. skills and knowledge that you have, then the chances are they can change the behaviors of the people out there or internally within an organization in the same way that you can change their behaviors, and ultimately therefore produce a similar result to the kind of result you're able to produce, i.e. a similar benefit for that client or prospect that you can produce. So here's my question. I'm sitting in your pitch, and I'm also seeing a couple of other companies that do what you do. If you all have similar features and can all produce a similar result, why should I choose you over them? Now, I've asked this question many, many times to many, many big organizations. And the most common response that I get is people put their hands up and they go, because we're nice people. And I've got to tell you all right now, you're all nice people. So it's not really about nice people. The challenge with this is that I will tell you how your prospects, your clients make a decision. Because if there's no real difference between you and your competitors, my decision is going to be based on one criteria. you guessed it, price. Because the challenge that I'm going to have is if the result with you and the result with you and the result with you are the same result or as good as, as good as possible, then I'm buying on price because I have no other way to distinguish between you. So when you rely on features and benefits to sell, you are basically in a race to the bottom. And I saw this post GFC. So I was in the UK post GFC. In fact, I launched my business in 2009, which who knew that it was such a bad time to launch a business? But there you go. I did, and I survived. And when I started talking about this and sharing this model with businesses, they were like, wow, I get this. Remember, when money gets scarce, people are looking to buy on what's in it for them. What's the value for them? And it's not just about price. They want to know that you can help them get to a better place in their future. So if this isn't the answer, if features and benefits isn't the answer, because also it's all based on logic, and we don't actually buy on logic. We need logic in there, but we don't buy on logic. If this isn't the answer, then what is? Well, what is selling to emotional desires. Because when I engage your emotional desires and I sell to them, it's much harder for you to put a price on your future than it is for you to put a price on a feature. And that's the real key here. And the other side to this is about emotion. This comes back to the study, right? This is about increasing that perceived pleasure of owning your product, your service. And that's what happens when you sell to emotional desires. So the $64,000 question is this: Marcus, how do you sell to emotional desires, right? So I'm going to give you one way right now. There are a number of other ways. I'm just going to give you one way right now because it's super simple and everybody can do this. In the story I mentioned a moment ago about the agency, this is what I do, okay? You ask a simple question. You ask, what's important to you about, and you name a context. So in my story a moment ago, I would have said to the media agency, hey, what's important to you about getting this sales training? And she gave me an answer. I've used this thousands of times everywhere. You can use this in phone calls, in meetings. We're going to talk about documents in a second, but the question is, what's important to you about, and you name a context. Let's say your IT infrastructure. What's important to you, Mr. or Mrs. prospect or client, about getting this new IT infrastructure? What's important to you about going on this holiday? What's important to you about social media? What's important to you about sales training? What's important to you about this bank account? What's important to you about? Name whatever it is that you sell or your product or service. Just insert it into that conversation and they will give you an answer. And that is what you talk about, and that is what you sell to. And that's the real key to all of this, because when you sell to these emotional desires, you're literally talking about something that is important to somebody, to that prospect, that client. And when you talk to them about that thing, they are listening, they're engaged, they're committed. And literally, the more you talk, as long as you keep it directly to their emotional desires, the more you talk about how you can fulfill that for them, the more they are going to be buying into what you're saying. So just to recap, selling to emotional desires allows you to increase the perceived pleasure of ownership for the prospect or customers that you're talking to. You have a clear point of difference. The reason why you have a clear point of difference is that you're not selling like other people. You're not selling features and benefits. You're connecting with them emotionally and selling to those emotions. So it really helps you to stand out from your competitors. You stop selling on price. We kind of covered this already. Look, it's very easy for me to put a price on a feature, but it's much harder for me to put a price on my future. And there is a big difference. And also, that top half of the triangle is all commodity-based sales. And commodity-based sales are based on price. So it becomes a very price-sensitive conversation. You sell to emotions. We buy on emotion and we justify with logic. When I first heard this, I'm like, what does that even mean? But now I get the first port of call in any sale is to connect their emotions with your product or service. because then they can justify that purchase. I kind of alluded to this as well. You can sell to emotional desires in emails and documents. Yesterday, my good friend Judy was talking about marketing. You can use emotional desires in your marketing as well. And it really puts the whole thing on fire. So phone calls, documents, emails, marketing, Zoom meetings, face-to-face meetings, it doesn't matter. You can sell to emotional desires absolutely everywhere and anywhere.